Dimp Digital presents Idle Game Chat.
Cool.
Hello, apps here from Dimp Digital. Welcome to Idle Game Chat. This is Dimp Digital's flagship video game podcast, where we take you through the ups and the downs of the video game world. We are here on your favourite podcast app and YouTube, absolutely free. However, if you want to support our grassroots independent endeavour, head over to patreon.com/Dimp Digital and join the community. Hashtag hand in pocket. On this edition, I'm once again joined by the reigning FGL Grand Prix winner. It's the resident referee, Logan. How's it going?
Hello. Yeah, good. Slowly getting blinded, which isn't a problem that I've had in recent months when we've been doing this, but I had to cock the blinds down slightly to block some light, which is an unusual thing to do.
Well, it brings out another problem when you're playing games, is that I get annoyed if I'm not playing in like darkness now, because it just like the glare can even if it's not directly on the game, like just if I have the blinds open, there's light coming in through the back of it. It's still an irritant. So
do you not find that a lot of games? I found this when I've been playing Hogwarts. Like every game that I seem to play at the minute is fucking dark as shit. Like. So trying to play most games now when there's any sort of light, and my screen's there and the light comes in. So I've got some blinds up, but it doesn't really always do 100% job.
No.
I'm with you on that. It's fucking annoying.
Need to brick up the windows really, and then be done with it. But I think the reason why I know this is a trend, but I think there's an assumption that people have HDR and perhaps OLED devices, so the darkness isn't as big a problem because if I turn this thing on in pitch black, and you're in playing Dead Space or something, it's just like insanely perfect almost for that sort of environment. But I suppose if you've got any sort of light, that's why Resident Evil 4 is now out, the remake. We mentioned it last week, scoring pretty well. I'm not even going to play that in the day, I don't think. I just want to play it when it's dark. So I'm actually going to schedule the game time around the environment, which I don't often do, but I think for that game, that's the best I'll get out of it. And that frees up Persona 5 to be played in the day. Gives Ronnie an excuse. I know you've got a little system here. So how do you feel about that? That's what I say.
It's a lot for the old brain to contend with.
It can
is
be.
what I would say. Then switching from one to the other. How does it deal with those changes of pace? Does it get fatigued? How could you do 5-6 hours of Persona?
No.
And then do 4 hours of
I wouldn't do
Resi? So how would you split it?
If I'm going to sit down and play something, I'll play that one thing, and then that'll be whatever happens in the time limit happens. I very rarely will I go, right, I've got 4 hours here, I'm going to play 2 different games. That's just not a thing I ever typically do. I might for example, someone might say, "Oh, let's go and play a multiplayer game." And if for some reason I'm playing it, I might then cut whatever I'm playing short. But I wouldn't. I can't see myself playing Persona for 3 hours and then going, "Got another hour here. Let's play a bit of Resident Evil 4." It won't happen. I'll just walk away and go and do something else. And then
what I meant was, you're saying I can do Persona 5 in a day, and then when it ticks over into the dark, I can do Resi. Yeah. So you're almost splitting it out. You're going day and night.
Yeah.
So how does the brain, the Ronnie, deal? Would you do 5 hours of Persona? I don't know if you do it that rigidly. You'd say, right, I'm going to play Persona until it's dark enough, and I'm happy with that. You might go, I'll play that till dinner, and after dinner I'll switch over, or something like that. You might draw a line in the sand there. But
generally, I'll just play because Persona is actually quite. You can just pick up and play it for a little bit and put it down. It's not the optimum way, but it does. It can work like that. So, I mean, I won't. If I play 5 hours in one day, that's like across a whole day. That's a lucky day. So very rarely would I sit there and play something for 5 hours and then go, I'll have some dinner and go back for 5 more hours. It'll be usually one session at some point during the day.
Okay.
And it'll only ever be a couple of hours if it's split into 2, usually. Just that the late nights sometimes become late morning or early mornings, don't they? That's where the time can be put onto it. But generally, I don't like playing 2 games at once. That is a concern of mine. And I haven't actually bought Resident Evil 4 yet. It didn't get pre-ordered. Obviously, I can download it as and when I want to. I don't know why I haven't done that. So that maybe I'm second guessing myself and thinking I will just play Persona until the end and pick up Resi when it's clear. But don't know what I'm going to do about that. But that's irrelevant to most people's day, and they can.
It's like picking that brain and just seeing what's going on, just scratching at the surface and seeing what's underneath. I like sometimes just doing that.
I'm trying to think. What do I need to play it for immediately? But that's every game. That's the trouble. And it becomes why are you doing it for any game? There's no answer to that. It's logical. So
sometimes it's just what you fancy playing and picking up. Like I didn't pick up Hogwarts immediately.
No.
Like, I'm never usually that fussed about spoilers or playing what's current. Like if something just goes, like I quite fancy having that, like I'm giving that a go or playing that, then I'll just generally pick it up. So I just operate on a. I mean, sometimes things crop up at a good price where you go, well, I'll put that in the library or whatever.
Yeah.
But generally, I'll just pick stuff up when I fancy or feel like playing it. That's the way that I operate.
Yeah, I like to plan. Well, I plan ahead and I think I want to play that based on what I've seen, and then it's like, well, I'll try and keep the runway clear until that time. But I actually wrote down. I've been starting to build out like topics to discuss when it's like really slow, or just to migrate away from news mainly. And one of them is what's the ideal sort of. If you're thinking of our game as a plate of food, like we go to the restaurant, we've got a menu, we pick off the menu. How many games should you have on your plate at once? What's the ideal number? And so we'll do that I think, because I just want to build out a few more of those. So I've got a library of them. But those sort of questions may be coming your way soon. FGL. Now, unbelievably, no new games released with scores. I can't remember the last time that happened. Someone will probably say, it was 3 weeks ago, you numpties. But it feels like if there was 12 weeks that we've been doing this, perhaps, not quite, but nearly, I reckon 10 of them have had new games out. So it's been...
at least.
It's been pretty constant. And we didn't have any. But we did have some transfer news. That transfer window is still open until the end of March. So it'll be closed by the time you guys listen to the next episode, providing we stick to our weekly cadence. Hall has got rid of Persona 4 Golden. Now, that obviously was ineligible to get a score because it didn't get a new OpenCritic page. He put it in there hoping there'd be a console-only edition page. There was already a PC score in there, and it didn't. They just put all the scores into that one page, meaning he couldn't have that score. Otherwise, you just pick a game that has a new console release and you basically guarantee the score. So that's why that happened. He has transferred in something unique. I think I didn't really. I thought this is a bit outside the box, and it may cost him eventually, but he's probably done other things that will cost him more. Counter-Strike 2.
It's mad that there's only technically Counter-Strike 2.
I know.
I was playing that when I was about 9.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Well, didn't they have? I mean, I know again, probably people start ripping their hair out, but Counter-Strike, as far as I'm concerned, existed. Then we got Global Offensive, which is what's played now, and this is Counter-Strike 2. And whatnot. And, well, I don't know.
I mean, there'll be people better qualified to talk to the leaps forward, but I think there was.
We're actually lacking in Counter-Strike players in Dimp. Most service-based games people at least dabble with. I don't think anyone dabbles with Counter-Strike or CS:GO really at all. Like Valorant has had a good run out previously, which is something that not a lot of mainstream will play. That's kind of, we had a bit of Apex action back when it first came out. Obviously, Warzone we've spoken about ad nauseum, and other things. Battlefield, if and when that ever comes out in a state that's acceptable, that'll probably get picked up by someone. But Counter-Strike, considering how well, it's a legendary franchise in many ways, just because of its popularity and kind of what it did back in the day. No one. Maybe Destiny Dave has dabbled with it previously, but regularly, like in 2023, in the last 3 years, I don't think that's something that people tend to pick up. Is it because it's not on those consoles?
Well, this is a point.
Is it on those consoles? It's not, is it?
Oh, well, they released... I remember, I think it was on the 360, they released like an arcade version. Like you could get what was back on Xbox Arcade,
right?
And it was just. I remember playing it, and it was rough as arseholes. Right. It was not. it was not a good experience. But we've spoke before about that game that could tempt me into the PC world.
Yeah.
Now, something like this, if it kicked off enough, could really easily be that game.
What does kicking off mean?
Well, if the game's good enough,
Right.
and I think B, if there is a group or a core that would play it. So
Right.
if Hall, Destiny Dave, like, I know Berry would play it, Par would easily play it. Like, I think there would be a big core that would be sniffing and playing this quite a lot. And, you know, I used to play Counter-Strike back in the internet cafe days. Like, that's where I
Rogues Asylum.
Was that what it's called?
Well, one was called Rogues Asylum down South Church. And I don't know what the other one was called. That was in the whatever that fucking
Victoria Plaza.
Yeah, I don't know what that one was.
That's the one I went to.
Cyber Centre or something, I think it was. Because Hockley and
That
Berth.
memory is incredible.
But
I don't know how it retains this.
Hockley and Berth used to go to Rogues Asylum. That's where I went for a few times.
Yeah.
With Berry. Like, so Berry would go there. Dale Raymond, he would go as well.
Yeah.
Then Hockley and Berth sort of defected to Cyber Centre or whatever it was called in that plaza.
Yeah, and that's the one that I went to with them.
Yeah. Got in late to the game.
Yeah, I did. I was a little bit late.
We'd just play Counter. We'd literally just play Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
I remember I went there on a bank holiday once. Probably got there about 11. Came out 5, 6.
Yeah.
Paid whatever it was
crazy.
per hour to play that.
Yeah.
But it was like great.
Yeah.
Because a LAN game is always a LAN
Yeah.
game. Whoever's in there, you'd have like 8 people in there, and it was just like I couldn't imagine doing that now, but back then. In
It's the way to do it.
Well, in absence of any sort of internet that was acceptable, when we were still on dial-up back then, where we lived. Broadband, whilst was a thing, I think, in other countries in like big cities, we didn't.
I had ADSL.
Right. Yeah.
Like way back then, so I was actually ahead of the curve.
I tried to play it on the dial-up once, and it was literally like 1 frame a second.
Yeah.
I played it probably for about 2 hours, and I got 1 kill.
Yeah,
because it was impossible, and everyone was going, "Oh, that ping's ruining it." And I was like, "Well, I'm trying to play the game here."
I'd love to go back and just see what the experience was like. Like, you wouldn't. It would just be like, how did I do anything? I reckon the frame rate, the lag, everything must have just been horrific. But
eventually, I installed bots onto it and just used to play with bots.
Yeah. That's the only real way you could properly play it, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, you know, I'll be eagerly watching this one because I would love. I mean, look, the simple fact is games like this and Valorant and whatnot are not really portable, I would say, to a console.
Right.
It's just, you have to play them, I think, with a mouse. Or if you want to play on console, you'd have to have a mouse and keyboard attached to it. But, you know, I will be just watching this one and potentially sniffing. But yeah, I mean, perfect transparency. It could easily tempt me into getting a PC, like easily.
I mean, there was talk many years ago that you were going to get a PC, and then it never
I've said before,
materialised.
it's the game. There has to be a game that would make me move over, or not I say move over, but just get one.
Yeah.
And just playing something like that where my FPS roots come from, I guess.
Yep.
Like natively on
You
PC.
all want to plug a bloody controller in, knowing you these days, though.
I wouldn't. No, I would like to. I would like to play it like how I did back when I was a kid. Like, I mean, for me, it'd be like a nostalgia thing mainly. I don't know whether I would thoroughly enjoy it the way that I did when I was a kid, or be. I mean, I wasn't good back then, but you know, nowadays on a mouse and keyboard with these sluggish reactions.
Just get Berry in, you'll fucking carry it probably.
Well, that's what I do with Warzone. Just go Berry and Par, just do the work, and I'll sit here supporting where necessary.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that's for me quite exciting. The idea of Counter-Strike 2, and they're saying they're overhauling everything.
Yeah, there's some really cool videos out there. I think I don't know if I shared one about the like the way that the smoke grenades work. It's a really small thing, like you'd think, well, what the hell's he talking about? But it's it reacts to the environment. So if you throw it in a hallway that's quite condensed, it will actually fill up the whole hallway rather than just a puff of smoke in the middle. When you're shooting bullets through it, it will make little like holes through the smoke. It's pretty impressive. I mean, it's not at all in my wheelhouse, throwaway sort of multiplayer, but I have played Valorant a fair bit, which is not the same, but it is in a way. It's a throwaway, round-based competitive multiplayer, and that was back in the days of getting pissed up, though. So
firmly behind him, he says.
Well,
but no, I mean, I think I love the idea of playing Counter-Strike with all my mates again. Like, that's a really appealing thing to do. I mean, it's not. I would be surprised these days if it's something that would last years, but it's definitely a sort of thing that could really tempt me to get a PC, I think. So
there could be
I'll be knocking on your door.
But when you get on there, you might think, there's other things I want to try here, like
well, that's the point.
It's
the sometimes you just need a reason, right? You need that one big reason to go and do it. And I'd sniffed around it. We spoke about it, and I'd probably say I was like 75%, 80% of the way there of really going for it. And then I just thought, no, I'll just get the consoles.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't this when we discussed it. I was like, there isn't anything really. I'd get it and end up playing like some odd piece of shit or whatever that we've got from Steam or whatever. And I was just like, it would be largely a waste. And I was waiting for something that would go, right, that is
over you come.
That's the gateway drug or whatever it is to a PC. Like that's the way in that I'm looking for to justify the expense. So let's watch him brief, but it's definitely high on the old sniffometer for me.
Good. Well, yeah, it looks like it's coming. I think there's been his invites and whatnot going out, and some of the stuff they showcased off looked pretty impressive. Does it need to be called Counter-Strike 2? Probably not, but we had this discussion with Overwatch 2 and all that stuff, which I know it's dropped off our radar, but I looked at the player counts and stuff, and they were saying it was pretty much like on par with the original and higher in some peaks. I don't know if it's sustained that, but I feel like Counter-Strike 2 is less of a problem for people because it's Counter-Strike and it's Global Offensive is what? 15 years old?
I mean, this is what I mean. I think it's fair. There'll be enough that's different for them to be able to distinguish it between the original. Like, whereas you look at Overwatch and you play Overwatch and
2012, so only 11 years old. Still only 11 years old, he says. Back when he was playing his Xbox 360 then.
Yeah, like this is what I mean. You look at it and you go, whoa. But yeah, I think that's a for most gamers and for us, I think that should be a exciting announcement. But going back to the core of the discussion, is it going to be
FGL footwear? I mean, I don't know because we don't actually know when the proper release is coming. I imagine it's going to be baited to hell. It'll be have that label on it for ages, and it's whether those Open Critic slobs decide to pick it up and start reviewing it.
Do we know what Go scored? Yeah, does that actually have a page?
Yeah, it's not got very many reviews done. I think part of that's because Open Critic's not that old. It's like I think 2013 or 14 it appeared. So some stuff before that, like 2012, wasn't really on the menu. But it only got an 82. Yeah. But it only got 12 reviews, which I think plays into the fact that it was. People perhaps didn't review it as close to August 2012. The review seemed to be, but I'm not sure Open Critic was knocking about. I think they may have backdated some of this.
Yeah, but it's just interesting to see if it had pulled anything through and what the aggregate score might be.
Yeah, I guess
I don't think that's necessarily indicative though, considering it's so bloody old.
Yeah. It's be a whole new thing, hopefully, and I don't know. We'll see about that, and we'll see about whether it lands as an FGL. I think it was a bit of a dice roll from Hull, but sometimes you've got to, as Paper would say, risk it for them biscuits.
Yes, sir.
What do you think of this one?
Yeah.
Sony was Metacritic's highest rated publisher in 2022. The PlayStation maker beat Paradox Interactive to take the top spot. So basically, Metacritic do a... Apparently this is annual. I meant to go back and look at them all, but they've made it so fucking difficult to find just the table I want. But no, you can't find that easily. Just out of interest to see. But Metacritic basically use the reviews from published games, and then they basically do a few bits of tweaks. Where's the bloody thing here? They tweak it based, so they weight it mostly on the score of the games, but also take into account the percentage of the scored titles which were rated as good, so 75 or higher, or 49 as lower, and also the number of great games, which is 90 or higher. So if you're in either of those brackets, you might get extra points, for example. But they were number one last year with... I think you got to release 5 games, which Sony didn't release. Well, they did release 5 games, but there was remakes, re-releases. They all count towards it. But no, I just thought I'd chuck that out. I wish OpenCritic did something like this, because it's mainly to boil people's piss in it, this sort of conversation. That's why Metacritic know what they're doing. They know by putting that out that that's going to roll those green bloods up, because guess whose highest rated publisher was last year? Xbox. And now they're not even on. I know. And now they're not.
I wouldn't have guessed that.
There's 45 publishers this year. Xbox didn't even make the list for last year's, I should say. Sorry, for 2022.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes more sense. Yeah.
So
we've said before they released fuck all noteworthy, and that backs that up.
Oh yeah, you get told off for using reviews though. They can't be trusted, but they do, as I said, give you a temperature drop. Anyway, here's the top 10. Sony Interactive Entertainment, Paradox Interactive, Activision Blizzard, Focus Entertainment, Take-Two, Capcom, Sega, Annapurna Interactive, Humble Games, and Devolver Digital. Nintendo down at a lowly 12th, didn't make the top 10.
All right. I've heard about 5 of those publishers.
Yeah, some of I mean, Annapurna and Humble and Devolver are mostly indie titles. Sony were second last year, so that's actually not a bad couple of years. This is what I say about consistency.
Yeah.
That's a couple of years where they're in the top 5 of a system that requires you to release at least 5 titles and score pretty well.
Yeah.
I think that says something, especially when people are dropping out of the top 50. They got feet.
Well, there's no doubt about it, is there? I mean, both of us have got both consoles, and we've both unanimously said Xbox have had feet up. Not just, you could argue for a long period of time, like in terms of great games and the consistency of releasing great games. They haven't been up there.
No, definitely consistency-wise, because everyone points to 2021 and like, well, they won Publisher of the Year in 2021. I was like, yes, 1 year out of what? 10? I don't know. It feels like it's been that long. That's why I keep looking at Starfield and thinking this better be the bollocks.
We've said it before, though. We've said, like, the latest Gears, like, their first-party titles, the ones that you go to an Xbox for, have been crap. Like, the latest Gears have largely been crap. Halo was a flop. Like, do you know what I mean, though? It's everything that they... Like, and Sony would be getting absolutely pulled over the coals if they were releasing God of War and stuff, like, in the way that Halo had been released, as an example. Like, everyone would be going, what are you doing? And yet, for some reason, Phil, friend of the show, gets away with it.
Well, he won't if he fucks up this year. I can almost certainly guarantee that, because I think the patience is thin. It should have been last year. Speaking of Microsoft, actually, I don't know if you saw in the Redfall previews that have gone out. Basically, a lot of people got hands-on with the game to come to event. Yeah. Reasonably positive. So something that we're not quite sure what it is more light being shed on it. Looter shooter being tabled as the most appropriate term.
Right.
As someone for you who likes FPS and enjoys that sort of co-op element, I would say worth a look at some of those previews. But that's shaping up to be better than what perhaps people have anticipated.
It looks like it had potential. But when you've been burnt so many times, you naturally sit on the side of pessimism, don't you?
Yeah. And
cynicism. But it looked like it had at the core of it something that could be fun, but I think it has to be played as a group of you. Longevity I think might be an issue. I think it's worth another look. I don't know if it's going to, in our group particularly, be hugely popular.
No. Some people have said you can actually play it single player and not be too concerned, but I've always think that comes from people that don't play a lot of single player games. And you do sometimes figure it out and think, well, this was clearly made for more people. But
you could do that in Left 4 Dead 2 or whatever, but it's just not, you like...
No. Division 2 is a good example. You can do it in that. I'm sure it's okay, but I feel like if it would be a bit empty, maybe it's because the core gameplay is not as engaging as it should be.
Oh, craps on it.
Got to sometimes, haven't you? Why not kick Ubisoft now and again? They get away with a lot. Also, Arcane are looking into, quote, removing the always online for single player. So,
gets a tick in a box for that.
Well, it will do. And also, all the people that are going, well, what does it matter? Well, clearly, they've heard the noise and it does matter. In fact, there's a quote here. I quite like the quote. Referring to players' request to play offline. This is all taken from VGC, by the way. Smith, who's one of the directors. I don't know. I've got his first name. Just Smith.
Agent Smith.
Agent Smith. Let's see if I can find it. Harvey Smith.
First
that was
name, Mark.
Mark Smith. Quote, there are two ways developers could react to that, right? When he's talking about, the request for not online. They could say, oh my God, you're always online. If you get on Steam and it's not online, you freak out. If you get on Xbox and you can't get the latest patch, you see what your friends are doing, you freak out. You always want to be online. So he's basically saying, who's offline?
Yeah.
But that response, I think, lacks empathy, he goes on to say. There are people who live in places where outages or their broadband is shitty, or they're competing with their family members because of their mum streaming a movie or their brother's on another device. And I think it's a legitimate critique. We do take it with a lot of empathy. We listen, and we have already started work to address this in the future.
So it ain't going to be their day dot.
I wouldn't have thought so. But
I think that's what I'd take from that.
I always say all's well that ends well. So if they do eventually get it out there, I think that's a win for a certain segment of people, and shows that they do sometimes listen. And for those that were hand waving it off, you've got a developer here. It's going to spend time and money fixing that because they believe it's the right thing to do. We saw EA, they're delisting a load of games in the next couple of weeks or so. It's like once they decide to pull the plug on it, if it's always online, it's gone.
Yeah.
And that's the end of it. But maybe people won't miss Redfall. But judging by the previews, might be a little dark horse. Anyway, Sony won the Metacritic award. Elden Ring named Game of the Year at the GDC Choice Awards. The Game Developers Choice Awards is the long hand for that. So it's now got the 3 of the 4 to make the quad. Trying to do what Klopp couldn't do. They've already eclipsed Klopp, done the treble here. They've had the Game Awards, DICE, and now the GDC Awards. The only one left is the BAFTAs, which will be decided by the time we next record. So we will know in the next episode whether they've completed the quad. Now, I actually put a bit of trivia out in the Dimp group about what was the last game, if any, to have done the quad, which is to get Game of the Year at all 4 of those award ceremonies. There is only one game that has done that, and I'm not going to reveal it here on the show. I think if people want to send a message on Twitter or reply to us or send a comment in YouTube, do so with your guesses, because I'll be interested to see if anyone gets it without looking it up. I don't think it's much of a surprise, but it kind of is a surprise that it's that game, and there's been many others that have been more widely acclaimed that, Second Comings of likes. I'll give away a spoiler there that it ain't that one, that didn't make the grade for it, but this one did. But no, Elden Ring's got the 3 of the 4. So will it get the BAFTA? It's now prediction time for you.
I think the pressure's on Chizzy.
Because the BAFTAs have done some weird shit before. They've done stuff like give it to Destiny, Vanilla.
I hope not, but
Why do you hate this game?
Because I just don't understand why everyone's going to town on it.
Play it.
Well, yeah, but it's like Football Manager. It's like a niche audience.
20
almost.
million people bought it.
I don't understand it.
I don't think it's niche anymore.
Well, this is what I don't understand. Historically, these Soulsborne games have been sitting there with a hardcore back alley of weirdos that want to be challenged to a ridiculous degree. Yourself included, and I'm stressing yourself out over it and whatnot. And then all of a sudden, this game's come out of nowhere, and everyone's gone, "Oh, it's so good!" And I've watched it. And I'm like, it still looks like the same shit you've been playing on this Soulsborne stuff for God knows how long. Except we don't. From what we've discussed before, it's open world, so you can go and get your cock cut off instantly if you want.
Yeah,
I just don't. I don't get it.
No, well, maybe you should play it.
No, I won't enjoy it. 100% won't enjoy it.
High fantasy, all sorts of weird things, combat driven.
The combat in the Soulsborne game has just always never appealed to me. it's like timing and this, that, and the other. It just looks slow,
Skill.
sluggish combat.
This is a bit quicker because you can choose to have a quick weapon and build your characters a bit. I think that's one of the key things is the builds that you can make.
So they've gone away from what makes a core Soulsborne. They're chasing the money.
Well, Bloodborne was a lot different. That was a much quicker game. And then Sekiro doesn't play anything like a Souls game. It plays it's a ninja style game, so it's a lot of timing and parrying. Whereas Dark Souls was slow, hide behind the shield sort of jobby, but this one does blend different combat styles pretty well. Magic, ranged, whoosh, off the horse.
So where I sit with it is I can accept that people like it, and I'm fine with that. I'm not saying because I don't like it shouldn't be up there. But I'm surprised that when you've got certain games that have been released in this period and last year, that this is the one that everyone's fawning over.
I'm not surprised.
I don't. Why? Is it that good?
Well, I don't think it is, but you can see by the scores.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't understand this game. Normally when I watch a game, I can go, I don't like it, but I can understand why other people do. And I just don't, from what I've seen of Elden Ring, I just don't get it. Like, I don't, Dr. Disrespect, out of all people, I've said this before, sitting there going, best game I've played all year. And literally, there's just fucking constant... Huh?
When did he play it?
When it come out.
Well, how can he say that 3 months into the year? Best game I've played all this year. Don't mean nothing.
I don't know
play at the end of the year and say it!
Come out. But and all there is clips of him fucking
dying, losing
his mind and dying and going mental. And I'm like, what? Like, I can get that there's a huge satisfaction in finally doing something that you've been challenged by. I get that element of it. But does that at its core make it better than a God of War Ragnarok? Or...
Depends if you like to be challenged. It's all opinion at the end of the day.
Nah. I ain't having it.
There ain't any objectivity in any of this. It's general opinion. It's one of the best games of last year for me, but I just preferred God of War. It's as simple as that. I think Elden Ring's got a lot of stuff it can improve on to be even better, but I just don't think they ever will improve it because they just get away with not doing it. But then, God of War, there's plenty of stuff you could improve in that, to be honest. There's
always ways to improve. Yeah. Like, is it better? Like, the yardstick has got to be, is it better than what else? On the balance of everything, is it better than the competition?
Yeah, but you could release a 2D game that's like perfect and then go, right, God of War, that's the perfect rendition of a 2D game. It's technically a better game of what it's trying to achieve. Like, there is no better, is there?
Yeah.
It's not, because you could say Call of Duty's better if you like, it hasn't got a first-person perspective. Warzone, you can play third-person, I think, in some maps.
Yeah.
That's better. But it's nonsense.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is each game individually can always be better.
Oh, yeah,
Man City can be better. No. Arsenal can be better. Any sports team, F1 team,
oh,
everything
actually,
can
I'll
always
correct you there. Liverpool couldn't have been better in the last 5 years, apparently. Fuck me, them bloating on.
Mentality monsters.
Carabao Cup and an FA Cup for that. I mean, setting the bar low, aren't we?
And Jurgen. Anyhow, so yeah, we are where we are with it. I just think in the year that there was, I think when something like God of War Ragnarok comes out and how epic that was, I just can't believe there's still this fawning over Elden Ring. But that's just my perspective. I haven't played it, so some people might be sitting there going, finger wagging, going, what are you doing?
They will.
And they can. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
So I think that based on the fact that it's picked up everything else, I think the pressure will be on and it probably will get it.
Yeah. I think I might have even said it after the Game Awards in December. I was like, I'm pretty sure this will get all of them or get very close. The one I wasn't sure about was DICE, to be honest. Because they can throw up some strange stuff, but BAFTAs are a banana skin as well. But we'll see. We'll find out on the next episode. And then also, very shortly, we should have our very own Dimp Digital Game of the Year special podcast coming in the next couple of weeks. So it could get the Grand Slam if it gets that as well. Isn't it?
The quintuple.
All of it. I mean, we'll see. Will you be fuming if that lands the Dimp Digital Award?
No, I mean, I won't be. It doesn't. I don't get that het up about it. It just, I just, from everything I've heard and seen, I just don't quite get. Like, I can understand people going, "This is a great game," but like, just the world, like the universal. I mean, maybe I'm the outlier. I probably am. Well, to be honest, yeah. With my gaming preferences, but I just don't. I just don't get it. I can understand it's good and that it gives that crowd what it wants. I am still surprised it got the widespread engagement and appeal. That still surprises me. But
the sales surprised me more than anything. Like, to hit 20 million, I was like,
yeah,
not sure how that's happened, because it generally takes, to get that sort of level of sales, it's a lot of mainstream engagement, not just enthusiast slops as you put them sitting in their alleys. Like, it needs more than that, and it's got way more than that. So
yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to see how
sales
many...
doesn't mean every single one of those people that bought it enjoyed it either. It just means that
or completed it.
I mean, there's a higher platinum percentage. I think it's like 10%, which is actually quite high. But you know, it doesn't mean they all enjoyed it. But conversely, it doesn't mean they all hated it. The real acid test will be a follow-up with Elden Ring's name stuck on it. Because how many people come back, and do more people get engaged by it? That's what I'm most interested in. And I really hope they do make things better than they can be.
Ray tracing.
They've added ray tracing, which seems like a nonsense on the consoles when it's not even running at a solid frame rate. You can't even lock the frame rate on any of the settings. At least you couldn't when I played it. And all they've got to do is to fix the Xbox Series X and PS5 version, is offer a third mode, which is Xbox One and PS. Well, it's got a performance mode, but it's far from performance. It don't.
It's far.
Well, it don't run. It runs at 60 about 5% of the time. The rest of it is 30, 40, 55. It's cack. Like, it ain't up to snuff based on what we've had this gen. All they need to do is add the PS4 or Xbox One, I guess, settings of the game as an option in the new gen stuff, because that runs flawlessly at 60 on both. Well, the way you can test it is you get the PS4 version load on your PS5, put it in performance mode, it runs like silk, just that you take a bit of a dip in visual quality. So all they need to do is offer that mode in the PS5 and Xbox Series X versions.
It's really weird, isn't it, that they don't go... Because you wouldn't even have to say PS4 mode or Xbox...
No, you just put Performance Plus mode.
Yeah,
just call
or
it
however
that.
you want to do it, or just locked frame rate or whatever. Like, you just, because normally there's a couple of different settings. You just can go all the way down to performance, or all the way up on graphics. I mean, you know, it's strange that they wouldn't give that for whatever reason. They've obviously not wanted to.
No,
because they wouldn't be getting the critical acclaim that they're getting now. Because they go, the graphics are crap.
A good section of my problems with it is if you fix performance.
Yeah,
and then there are other things. Don't get me wrong, I could reel off a list of them, but they're not.
Performance over graphics all day. I've done it on Hogwarts. I've gone, give me that performance, and it runs like butter now. It's just slagged it off beforehand, and I whacked it all the way down. I was like, this is silky smooth.
Why they're adding ray tracing, I don't know. This is the notes here. It says, please note that performance, such as frame rate and resolution, may be impacted by playing with ray tracing on. I don't know what this ray tracing... I mean, even Salmon agrees, which we very rarely do. This ray tracing is waste of time for it. It's so expensive, like resource wise, on a PC and on a console, that it's like
they're saying that they've sold to, as we've discussed already, like this like mainstream audience.
Yeah,
like it seems like a weird thing to do. I mean, when he shared that in the group, my first thought was ray tracing.
Yeah.
Like what? Like hello?
Yeah, it's not. I would rather they spent time on the performance, but they haven't, and they won't. There's rumours that there's going to be mid-gen refreshes, which we won't talk about because it's rumour and innuendo. But that would be one way. It would probably fix Elden Ring, is that they will have more power in them. So the unlocked nature of their performance mode as it is would probably be up to snuff to run it, but. I don't know. I'd be interested to actually look at some videos of the ray tracing to see how good it is or how different it is. I hope Digital Foundry do a video on it, because that's the easiest way to digest that sort of stuff. But yeah, 3 out of the 4, ray tracing inbound. Will it get the quad? We'll find out on the next episode of Idle Game Chat. Right, I think I'm going to call it there.
Yeah.
Call it off, they say.
Yeah.
We'll just be slagging off things that we haven't played for another 45 minutes. I'm going to leave everyone in the capable hands of, well, I say capable, Paper. So Paper's returned with a Pokemon-themed episode. New Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Sword, and Pokemon Violet all rolled into one segment.
Oh,
So he's been
busy, the boy.
He's been busy on that Pokemon lore. He skipped Arceus, which we do talk about. So
He ain't got a Switch, though.
He's got a Switch Lite.
Has he?
Yeah.
Oh,
So it's all handheld as well. That's the other thing. Everything he plays on the Switch is handheld only. So that's an interesting wrinkle to it as well. But he will be with you, with myself, for the next 45 minutes or so. So we'll see you on the other side. Here we are then, back with some game chat to close out Idle Game Chat. Paper has returned after his MMO-centric escapades in the last few months. He's now back on a Pokemon escapade. So still not what people want to hear about. MMOs and Pokemon, probably two of the worst. But that's what you've been up to, so you don't get to direct what you're up to. And in Pokemon and MMOs, that's Paper's little gaming life.
That is true, though. I'm disappointed that I don't get the introduction of the world record holder speedrunner anymore.
I don't know if that's still accurate.
It's 100% accurate. No one else is playing that game, so no one else is going for it. But yeah, Pokemon and MMOs, that's what his life's been about recently. So yeah, we've done the MMO. As we say MMO, it was Guild Wars.
Yeah,
with a hint
wow.
of other MMOs. And then, and now we're on the Pokemon train. And for our listeners that have got video on as well, they'll see
the free games. Free games, yes. So people are already frightened about that potentially happening, but there are free games on the docket here of varying ages and genres, because Pokemon isn't just what you think it is. The question at the top is, that we just mentioned MMOs, when is the Pokemon MMO going to come out, if ever? Surely that is some level of gold mine that is waiting to be tapped into.
There is a Pokemon MMO, like a fan-made one out there. I can't remember what it's on, but they've basically plugged together a load of like the old sort of style, like it's in blue and red and all like that. And people wander around, and it's in that style, and it looks quite interesting. But it is a fan-made thing. It's got a lot of people playing it, but not me. I think I'm going to put my hat on the limb. Hat on the limb, is that even a fucking saying?
Don't know. If you're cutting bodies up and hanging up around the house, maybe you can pop your hat on an arm.
Out on a limb and say a Pokemon MMO game, much like Hogwarts Legacy, would get a lot of traction in terms of the buzz. The hype train would be in so much full swing that it would only disappoint.
Yeah, probably. That's probably the correct outcome there. I'm surprised they've not. There is a Pokemon MOBA knocking around on Switch. I think it's called Pokemon Unite. I think it's a free-to-play thingy at all.
Well, we can check.
You can check, can you? He's got a little booklet there.
It's a little booklet, as called to the camera, that gives you all the Pokemon games that are out there at the moment on that Switch.
Yeah.
So there's a lot. What do you think it's called? It's not the Let's Go Eevee, not Pokemon Home, Sword Shield, not Tournament, Quest, Rescue Team DX, Cafe Remix, Pokemon Unite.
I think that's it. A battle arena type thing. That's the free-to-play one I remember seeing on doing the. And apparently it's not too terrible. I know we dabbled in a little bit of Heroes of the Storm many years ago before Meltdowns happened, and I was wondering whether you maybe get into that. Maybe that's some homework for you to go away and look at if you're still all Pokemon giddy after this.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a little bit of I've been Pokemoned out a bit, but it's like that MMO urge. You take a break from it, and 6 months down the line, you get that urge to jump back in. That's that's how they get you. That's probably how FIFA can release a game every year. That people step away from it, and then a new game pops up, and they're like, "Oh, I want that bit of urge." So
you'll be lucky if you get a 6-month gap between Pokemon games these days. They seem to be churning the bastards out a couple of times a year. So we'll have to see about that. Let's do a bit of history on Pokemon, because mine's pretty standard. Played Pokemon Red on Game Boy. Don't think I played anything. I actually don't think I played anything else after that. I may have dabbled in Yellow on an emulator, because I remember them adding Ash. It was more tied to the TV show, from what I remember. Pikachu would follow you around, and because I'd watched the show, Ash is gone now. There's a new series starting without him. That's it. His journey's come to an end. But I remember dabbling with that on a laptop or a PC many years ago. But then I just sort of left Nintendo and Pokemon behind almost for that region. You've actually had probably more Nintendo devices than me over the years since that Game Boy, GameCubes and whatnot. But what happened to Pokemon? Did it get picked up occasionally, or has it just been a bit of a, kids shit? At one point it wasn't cool. I remember that period of life in probably secondary school where it was, in fact, you'd be called a proper nerd if you still played that after a few years or collected the cards. But then you sort of get past that and then back into adulthood, and it's like, it's cool again because it's nostalgic. But Pokemon games, cards, where you been at for the last 25 years or whatever it's been?
It is 25 years because they just released their Pokemon card 25-year set. I think I took a very similar journey to you, but I've just come back to it earlier. You haven't ventured as back into it, though you did do Arceus. But it's, for me, I was blue and you was red. So this is how, when we were kids on the Game Boy, I think we both had colours, didn't we?
Yeah. It wasn't even a colour game either, so pointless.
No, it's just that we just wanted to play the game. And I remember going camping trips and trying to catch Mewtwo and stuff like that when we were younger. But yeah, much like you, played that, completed it. Was into the cards when they first come out, and the TV series, and the first movie. I remember going to the movie and getting the special card and stuff like that. It was proper hype train as a kid. I remember being in secondary school. Must have been about year 7, so this is our first year of sort of senior school or secondary school. And we were all collecting cards at that point. I remember all my cards being stolen after PE, which is physical education. Probably had Charizards and all that in there now, worth hundreds of
quid now. Yeah, that's worth a lot back then because obviously we had no money or jobs, but definitely now it makes it even sicker.
Yeah, you think about it. I think the only thing that was stolen back in my life that I think back and think, wish I found out what happened to that. But anyway, I think. Much like you,
they got banned from the school, didn't they? Because there was a spate of thievings going on. They eventually banned Pokemon cards from the school because people kept nicking them.
Yeah, they were a commodity. Everyone wanted them. It was the craze.
And it wasn't even for monetary value, though, that back then. It was just a status thing. There probably was monetary value, but we weren't really aware of it because we were too young, I guess. But it was more for just, I guess, people just wanted to have all the fucking rare ones or the cards.
Yeah, I think I remember swapping with a guy called Tom Cutter once, and I got a Japanese card or something like that.
Yeah.
And there's no much different, but the back was different, and it had Japanese writing on it. Probably as well. There's probably half them fake. So it was. I look back on now with nostalgia and that was quite fun. But then you're right, it sort of became uncool, and people put it to the side. And then there was lots of games that over the years that sort of was good. But I don't think I ever really dabbled back into it. The first time I got back into it, and actually this is one that has probably slipped your mind a little bit, Pokemon Go.
Of course. Yes.
Exactly. I think that's when it sort of reopened its doors to a wider audience again, and we sort of was like, oh, this is interesting, this sounds useful. Not useful, but it sounds like a really interesting thing to partake in. And actually it was good fun for a period of time. I remember me and Hall meeting up in London, going around catching Pokemon and just doing a pub crawl. It was like that type of thing that you could do it, going out, I can see if I can catch this, that, or the other, and go from pub to pub, and it was a good laugh. So we did that for a while, and then that Pokemon Go curve died down, though it's still going quite strong.
Still people playing it,
yeah.
I've seen Pee-wee knocking about on it sometimes. Still.
Yeah, still. I think Krog plays it as well. Still.
Yep.
But I think after that point, like the first real game back into the series was for me was Sword, and that I think mainly was driven from the pure fact that it was the region was meant to be a British region and stuff like that, and so like I was like, oh, this sounds interesting, you know, and I think this came out around the pandemic time as well, when just Pokemon cards just before when Pokemon cards became really popular again, and I got into watching some of that stuff on YouTube and collecting some of it back then as well, though that sort of stopped recently, quite a while now, but like it's sort of that mania kicked up again around sort of Pokemon Sword. I think everyone was expecting this to be, because it was, I think, the first Pokemon game on the Switch to be the first one that was like this real open world scenario, and you had open world elements to it. And I think we'd been maybe shoehorned because of Zelda, Breath of the Wild.
Yeah.
I think, it's going to be like that. And it wasn't, and we can talk a bit about that game later. And then I sort of played that a bit, put it down, and then very recently, having got back into the cards and then put those down again, I sort of got a bit of time in my hands. I was like, right, I'm going to go back and complete Sword. Completed it, and it was around the same time Violet was coming out. So for me, it's like I was like, right, I want to give Violet a go, because that was meant to be a proper open world game. And then after that point, Pokemon Snap, I was like, let's try this as well, because that was nostalgic. And that was another game actually we've got to mention. Back when we were playing it on our Game Boys, we also played games like Pokemon Snap on the N64, or was it the Pokemon Arena tournament or something like that. Was games that were quite nostalgic, and I would probably look back and they're probably quite pants, but like you look back at these things and think, they were good fun when times were easier. And so there was definitely I was on a nostalgia train of recent, and so the Pokemon world got ignited, though it's going to probably get put down for a bit for a while until that reignites again. But yeah, that's sort of the shortened / long history of Pokemon in the world of Mr. Piper.
That's the abridged version of it. Well, you mentioned that Pokemon Sword was the game that kind of got you back and then was put down and then recently picked up and finished again. So, I mean, let's just start there. I mean, you mentioned the potential slant of it being a British region or a region based around Great Britain is what pulled you in. Did that ring true in the end? Was it as exciting as it seemed on paper, or was it a faithful adaptation of what life is like in little old Britain?
If I'm being honest, it isn't. There are loose things in it, like, you know, some landmarks that they'll have a big wheel in one of the cities, or a big clock tower and stuff like that. And then in the dress style, there's some very stereotypical dress styles for the characters that are within the game, like some cab drivers or some, I don't know, a pilot or kids dressed in school uniform type thing. But really, apart from and then if you look to the map, there was definitely a level of, hey, I can see how this looks like, though it wasn't shaped, but it could be the UK as in the south, the Midlands, and then Scotland up in the north and stuff like that. It was on the map. But apart from that, like, it's not like going and playing Watch Dogs Legions where you're walking around London and you go, oh, look at that, that's great, I know those signs here, there, and stuff like that. It was really just like loose influences here or there around the art styles and the map layout more than anything really. And it was ultimately just a Pokemon game that's, you know, been adapted to some of that stuff.
And then what's the overall thoughts on Sword and or Shield? I mean, I know people they say they're separate games, but they're really not, other than very minor. Well, it's the starting Pokemon, isn't it, that you basically get tied to. So first return, I guess, for a while. I'm assuming at some point you got a bit bored of it or long in the tooth, because you did drop it for a considerable amount of time. And I remember you saying many a year ago, saying, oh yeah, near the end of that, I've just got to do the last few gyms or whatever it might have been. And then it just sort of died a death. And I was like, cool, he's done a biff and dropped it, I don't know, 2 hours before the end or whatever it is. But how did you find the experience of Pokemon Sword and or Shield?
Yeah. For me, Pokemon Sword was, I played about the first 20 hours. I got around all the gyms, except the final gym. And ultimately, I put it down. I think I put it down I was going to pick it back up, and then when just things happen, and 2 weeks pass, 3 weeks pass, and then you're like, oh, I can't bother to jump back into that now.
It's too hard work.
Past.
Yeah.
Got to remember all those things that I'd forgotten and that you got in your mind, and I don't want to go back and do that 20 hours again.
No.
I think it was like, it was a faithful game, as in it was very Pokemon. You go around and do all the gyms and collect all the badges, and then you got the main battle at the end. I think I'm glad I re-picked it back up. Like, I played it for about another 7 hours when I picked it up. It was probably another like 3 or 4 to finish the main part of the game, where I had to go and actually do a load of. I went to the main gym, the final boss, and realized I was pretty much under leveled, so I went away and sort of leveled up a bit. So there was a bit of grinding.
Yeah.
But because I put it down for so long, it was okay. And at that point, you can figure out how to efficiently grind by just looking on the internet and saying, oh well, if you go and do these battle arenas around, you'll get these candies which can level up your Pokemon really quickly. So I just did that, and then I was like, oh, and I thought that was it was finished and stuff like that. I was about to put it down, and I walked down, sort of restart like when all the credits came, and then I went back to my house, and then as I came back, someone spoke to me at the house, or as it was recut, and I was like, oh, there's another bit of story here, and actually they haven't fully completed that bit. So I went and just sort of followed that train. So I did that, and that was like another sort of 3-4 hours worth of gameplay of going around doing a load of battles and so forth, leveling up a bit more. And then that then leads you into the expansions, but I didn't want to go as far as paying for the expansions for it. I think there's was 2, if I remember correctly, for Sword. But then that's when I put it down. I was like, oh, I got I feel like I completed the game, got the legendary.
Yep.
Not going to buy the expansion. That's a good place to call it a day. And so for me, it was. I'm glad I refinished it. Would I go and play another Pokemon like game like that again? Probably not. I feel like it's the same as every other game, but I did play more Pokemon games, so it didn't stop me from playing Pokemon.
So, in terms of the gaming gallery, does Pokemon Sword and Shield earn its place anywhere in your personal exhibition?
I think so. I think it does. So if I'm going to give it a place on the gaming exhibition, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I've got my choice between my bronze, silver, gold, and platinum.
Absolutely.
I've narrowed that, haven't I? Good
or you can
memory.
chuck it in the bin, like, if you think it's not worthy of any of those.
I think for me, Sword is an easy bronze.
Yeah.
It's a nice game to play. I wouldn't not recommend it to people, because Pokemon's a good Pokemon game, and you can have as much or as little fun in it as you want. For me, it just didn't push enough boundaries. They obviously did the first zones that you could see Pokemon in the wild and stuff like that. So there was definitely some level of innovation there.
Yeah.
But for me, even at the time, it just didn't feel like it went as far as it could, especially as it released around the same time as Breath of the Wild, where you just suddenly had this open world, game, and you could go off and do what you wanted. And I think that's what the Pokemon fans were craving, and it just didn't get that. So for me, it was a good game. It was a good, healthy Pokemon game, but it wasn't anything that I would write home about. So for me, it's a bronze.
Bronze for Pokemon Sword and Shield, so that's that. And then chronologically, what was the next Pokemon game you picked up? Did you dive into Violet, or was it new Pokemon Snap?
So for me, I jumped into new Pokemon Snap.
Okay.
And so the reason for that was
Palate cleanser.
Effectively, it's like eating the ginger in between sushi just to cleanse your palate.
The fuck's that?
I'm too much of a snob these days. Sushi and
Aristocrat.
ginger. Yeah, exactly. Not Aristocats.
No. Was that a TV show?
No, it was a film by Disney, wasn't it? The Aristocats. There's a funny story behind that, but I won't. That's divulging into another topic which can be saved for outside of this chat.
Yes.
So yes, I wanted to. I didn't want to go straight from one big Pokemon game into another big Pokemon game, because both games are sort of 25-hour games and stuff like that. Not that I spent 25 hours straight on that one.
No.
It was definitely split up, but I didn't want to just finish that and go into what could potentially be very much a reskin, like going from FIFA 21 to FIFA 22 or something like that. Yeah. And so for me, I wanted to play another game, and I I saw that we had Pokemon or new Pokemon Snap out there. There was definitely a point of me was getting nostalgic and like, oh, I used to love Pokemon Snap as a kid. I remember going around, trying to get the pictures and stuff like that. So I jumped into that because I wasn't really done with my sort of Pokemon phase at that moment in time, and so yeah, that was where I went with my next choice. So I ordered Pokemon Snap off Amazon, and it turned up the next day.
So for those that are uninitiated, new Pokemon Snap, how would you describe it? Because my understanding is it's sort of on a rails. You sit on like a car or something and drive around an environment. You don't control the car, and the aim of the game is to snap, i.e. take pictures of different Pokemon that are in the resort or I don't know if they're in the wild or not. And I'm assuming you get given a number of objectives that you have to fulfill, like, catch a Pokemon eating, catch a Pokemon drinking, catch a Pokemon fight, I don't know. And so that bit I think I understand, at least unless I'm completely wrong. I guess what I struggle to tie together is how that effectively comes together in a campaign and how you progress. So for those that are uninitiated like me, how does the Pokemon Snap kind of loop work?
So it's similar to what you've described. However, it's slightly different. Yeah, well, in terms of the way you progress on the campaign side of it, at least, is wrong. But but like, yes, you are effectively on a rail little car, and you've got a set route. There are like side quests, like little objectives, like for person take a picture of a Pokemon fight and take a picture of a Pokemon eat and stuff like that. But that isn't your general main quest to get you through. What you are doing is you're taking pictures of Pokemon as you go around, and then you're trying to take those pictures get rated out of like a bronze, silver, gold, and so
platinum.
There was out of 4, so it might have been a platinum as well.
Well, they've copied us.
There was definitely 4 stages you could get of that one Pokemon, and if you was to get a good snap of that Pokemon, because it might have been like doing a move at that time, or eating, or
taking a crap,
fighting, something, whatever, like you might get a higher score for that, and if you get it centered and all these types of things in the frame,
composition required as well.
Yeah, so you're start for the progressive, start to getting good, pictures and stuff like that. And then as you progress, you start getting slightly different skills that you can shrink down the car, and then it takes you on a slightly different route, or you can speed up the car. And then there's these, I can't remember what they're called, but like these blossom flower things that you then get a ball and you have to throw them at these blossom flowers, and then that will strike the Pokemon to do different poses and stuff like that. So ultimately, the game gives you ways to try and catch Pokemon doing different things. You get scores for that, and then by getting to a reasonable score on that level, that will then unlock maybe the night version of that route, or then maybe another route over in the snow area, or a route in like under the water or whatever it is. And there's a main sort of campaign underlining story to this, where there was this ancient
evil
at the end of no, not really. There's these ancient large Pokemon, effectively. So like imagine like a little Pikachu, but this Pikachu is like the size of your house.
And that's not tied into like Pokemon Sword, because I remember seeing like giant Pokemon in that. There's like I don't know what it was called now. There's like a system in place where they'd grow,
like VMAX or something.
Yeah, that's it. So it's not that. It's just it's a different.
No, and so it's like it's got its own like little lore to it, that there was this explorer back in the day that took these pictures of these like illuminated large animals, but the pictures are all blurry. No one's ever taken pictures of these large animals before, and so there are as you build your way through, ultimately 5 of them, and you then get to unlock a couple of levels. Then you get to go on the route with that that large animal, and you might need to trigger something for him to become large or pop out, and then get some good photos and so forth. That's sort of how you progress along through the game. So there is a slight campaign. It's an 8 to 10 hour game.
Okay.
So nothing too long. So, I would say like taking the photos does sometimes become a little bit tedious. Like you can definitely do an hour or so, and then maybe 2 hours, then you want to put it down because it's like, I've been taking photos for whatever. But it's or you're like trying to flip over to the next bit, and so you're desperately trying to get this one Pokemon doing something.
Yeah,
stupid.
and if you miss your chance, you have to fucking.
You have to do this. Yeah, so you do the same route about 3 or 4 times, or more than that, because you're like, well, I missed that, and now I've got to go back and do that.
So has it got to be like a perfect run on the route, or can you accumulatively get and tick off the? Okay.
And it's not even ticking off. It's just like you might get like you need 3,000 points or whatever, and like you did the first round, you got like 2,200, and then you get the next
banked.
run, and you get and that's banked, and then you can't then take the same photos at the same. So if you take photos of that, let's say that Pikachu, and you've already got a photo of that at 300 points, and you're taking a crap picture at 200 points. It's not going to give you 200 points. It just won't give you any points. So you have to then take better pictures to then increase your score and stuff like that. So you don't have to get like a perfect run, but you have to make sure you've at least walked away with an accumulative amount of points to get you to the next level. I think it was a nice little game, but as I said, it became a bit tedious. The underlying story was sort of there, but I'd
ain't The Last of Us, is it?
Yeah, it's nothing to write home about. It definitely isn't The Last of Us. It probably isn't even Pokemon Sword level storytelling, but it's an interesting little bit of lore to the Pokemon universe, about these giant Pokemon in islands that don't really exist elsewhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a nice little game.
Nice detour,
palate cleanser while staying in the Pokemon world.
Lovely. So does new Pokemon Snap earn a way into the Dimp Digital Gaming Gallery, or does the palette cleanser not get its due?
So for me, the palette cleanser doesn't make it onto the list. For me it was I enjoyed it, but it probably needed to be shorter. Personally, like for a game,
that's never a good sign, is it? When you're like 8 to 10 hours needs to be shorter.
No, like if you look at it, like it probably is. You probably want to wrap it up in like a 3 to 4 hour game. If I'm being honest,
once you've done it a few times, I can imagine the loop. Like you've done a few, once you've taken the pictures and manipulated the Pokemon a few times, what else can you realistically do to make that more interesting? It is just
I didn't do any of the side quests because I was like, I'm not going to keep going out there just trying to take a picture of this person, eating and whatever in that sort of position. And so, like for me, like there's definitely if you enjoy that type of thing, there's lots of opportunity to spend even longer in the game. For me, I got to a point where I was like, I don't want to keep going around the same route, taking pictures of the same Pokemon and trying to figure out a slightly different position to take it in or that. I don't mind doing it a couple of times, but after that, I'm sort of done with it and I want to just move on to the next sort of level.
Yeah.
And I feel like they put unnecessarily padding in it to make it a bit longer. And so for me, like if it wasn't as long, and if you look at the old Pokemon game, I think it only had like 2 or 3 levels, probably only like I think you can complete it in 60 minutes or something like that, maybe 2 hours, an hour and a half. If you look at how long to beat on the old Pokemon game, I bet it's less than 2 hours. But this one is about an 8 hour to 10 hour game, and so it's I think I could have quite happily. I liked the nostalgia when I first picked it up. But then by halfway through, I was like, I don't want to not finish this game because it's a short game. So how do I just get to the end? And it just became a bit repetitive. So
fair enough. I like that though. New Pokemon Snap doesn't earn its way into the Dimp Digital Gaming Gallery. Sometimes you just got to draw a line. Adkins never does. He always puts stuff in, even though he spends 40 minutes slagging it off. So I like there's a bit of ruthlessness there. That's what I like to see. Well, then we land to Pokemon Violet, which is the latest entry into sort of the mainline Pokemon series and probably the latest entry of any Pokemon games that have come out. I have to ask the question though, because earlier in 2022, which is when both of these games came out, we had Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is the one that I played. Was that in contention? And if it was, how or why did you skip over that and opt for the new shiny Scarlet and or Violet?
It wasn't in contention. I did think about it. When I was looking at my Switch and I'd seen everyone I was connected with Switch had already put 40 hours in Arceus and stuff like that, and I thought it was probably a good game and I'm probably missing it. If I'm being honest, buying Pokemon Violet triggered the want to go back and finish Sword before I started this.
Right.
So ultimately, I wanted to play Violet. And then when I'd ordered it, I was like, oh, shit, I've still got like a couple of hours. I only thought it was a couple of hours left in Sword at the time. It turned to about 7.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't really start this without at least completing Sword. Yeah. And technically, from a chronological point of view, Arceus, Snap, and any other Pokemon games in between isn't really part of the series, even though they're under the same franchise. It doesn't sort of.
It's where it all began, Pokemon Legends. Interesting. Humans and Pokemon have only just been thrown together. Finding your feet. The true origin story, some are saying.
And don't get me wrong, it's a game I want to play and go back to.
But you've done it out of order now. I don't know if you're going to be able to.
Well, it's more the fact that I just, once again, I needed a bit of a break, so I definitely haven't ordered it. Though that being said, from what I've heard, Arceus still seems to get higher reviews rating, like in terms from like the player base and reviewers than Violet does. So Violet and Scarlet. So I still think I could go back and I could get away with it without feeling like I'm taking a massive step backwards in terms of like, this is nowhere near as fun.
No. And the last thing I just wanted to run through, we use OpenCritic for the Fantasy Gaming League, as many people know. So those scores are interesting to look at. So I wanted to run through the scores of the Pokemon games that we've spoken about today, and also Arceus, just for, well, that's the closest analogue for me out of these, because it's, they were like 10 months apart and they were kind of doing a similar thing. So Pokemon Sword and Shield 2019 got itself an 80, which is pretty good. 64% of the critics recommend that. There's a little critic score in there as well. New Pokemon Snap, 80. 76% of the critics recommend that. Pokemon Legends Arceus, 84. And 87% of the critics recommend that. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, 72. It's below the 8, which is not what we want. And then only 48% of critics recommend that. That's after 126 critic reviews. I've been critical of this game despite not playing it, because some of the videos I've seen of its performance and the bugs, I was astounded by. I thought Pokemon Arceus, definitely the weakest part of that was how poorly it ran and looked at times. And when they announced that Scarlet and Violet was coming a mere 10, 11 months later, I must admit I was surprised, and I thought, well, it's even going to go one of two ways. One, we find out that Pokemon Legends was being done by a B team of sorts, and, as a spin-off, basically, and then Pokemon Scarlet and Violet will be nicely polished, and then, or B, they've spread themselves too thin, and they're both going to end up suffering, and I felt like it ended up being the latter of those two, but that's just on performance and bugs and how it looks. The Switch, obviously not a graphical powerhouse, but you tell me, is that a correct assessment of the technical side of things? And ultimately, does it matter? I mean, I'd argue it always matters, but, people like to give free passes out for things like Elden Ring, so what are we doing?
For me, it was... Who's giving out free passes? Right. For me...
Adkins, isn't it?
It's always Adkins, isn't it? It wasn't the smoothest graphically. There was a lot of popping. In terms of Pokemon, like you'd suddenly a Pokemon would just pop up, and it's like it doesn't nicely fade in and stuff like that. And when you're suddenly got a faster moving vehicle which you can get in the game and you can glide and stuff like that, it becomes a bit extra poppy and stuff like that, and so forth. For me, I didn't let it bother me too much, that side of things. There was nothing groundbreaking that I kept getting kicked out of the game, or I couldn't get past a certain area, or I got glitched through anything, like some stuff that would just really get me out. It was more for me, there's some of the graphical popping that was noticeable, and I was a bit like, it would be nice if the Pokemon sort of faded in rather than popped straight in. But I'm also playing on a Switch Lite, which is probably like the worst graphical screen out of all the Switches, and probably worst performing of all the Switches, so I don't expect an awful lot anyway. I'm not playing like on an OLED or anything like that, and I don't play any consoles, so but I've got the PC, obviously, the rig. But so for me, like, it was okay. It could have definitely been more polished and better in that type of aspect. I didn't have any groundbreaking bugs that sort of kicked me out or stuck me, and I needed to reload or whatever, stuff like that. So that side of things I was okay with. I did notice it. Not ideal. I think my view is it people expected a lot, I think, after Arceus, and this probably was, from my understanding, having not played Arceus, was probably, though it was probably 2 steps forward from Sword, it was probably 1 step back from Arceus. And so, like, if you think of Arceus, 3 steps forward from Sword, so it was. I think that's probably what kicked it on the critic scores, that people were like,
Yeah.
come on. You've just released a game that's better, and now you're taking releasing something poor, and this is meant to be the big title game. It should have been the other way around.
This is the mainline. Yeah, this is the mainline sort of continuation of the series. It did get. Don't get me wrong. There was definitely people that I saw responses saying this is a groundbreaking Pokemon game because it mixed up the formula and changes it. I saw a bit of that of Arceus, and I definitely felt like that particular game did do, it had open zones to go around. The Pokemon were there in the wild to go and interact with him real time and whatnot. But it sounded like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it sounded like Violet and Scarlet may have taken that a bit of a step further, or just gone to that next level, which come at a bit of a cost. But what's the main additions that they've added from Sword and Shield? I guess that's the best analogue. That feels like now that was like old style Pokemon mainline. We've got Arceus, which is this weird spin-off, Arceus Legends, Pokemon Legends, they title it as. That was sort of a halfway house, and then this is the next mainline entry. What was the changes that they made from Sword and Shield to Scarlet and Violet that you was like, oh yes, I either like this or I don't like it?
There were a couple of 2 main things that sort of 3, let's call it 3 main things that I noticed that was sort of like that step forward from Sword and Shield. The first one was like you could see all the Pokemon now. So even in Sword and Shield, you could be walking through grass areas and suddenly
pop out
and just end up being attacked like the old Pokemon game.
Yeah.
I must admit, I find that a pain at the backside, because sometimes you have to go through these places, and sometimes you don't want to get into a Pokemon battle because you want to get from A to B, and it can be extremely frustrating. So for me, like, that was point number 1. A small point is you can just see all Pokemon in the wild. 2, there is more of the wild now. The wild is just everything. So whereas in Sword and Shield you would go into the wild area and then go off to the city and stuff like that, this one it's just everything's in the wild now.
You just travel outside the town and potentially you're already in the wild because
and you're not loading screens between the towns. You literally just walk out of the town. And
so the entire thing's open. The entire world, from anywhere you go, from the start to the end to everywhere in between. There's no loading screens, other than probably when you go into an interior. But you can literally travel from A, B, C, D, E, F all the way through without a loading screen in terms of the exterior.
That's correct.
Yeah. So Arceus was split into zones. You would travel to a zone which was quite big and had all the Pokemon out, but then you would go back to your hub world and travel to the next zone, like the snow zone, for example. Yeah. So you're saying you can adventure out and just travel there, just from going on foot or using a vehicle or whatever you've got. Or I've seen people riding Pokemon around on it, so I know that's a thing.
There are a few little cut screens when you might be going into a building that's got like its own separate instance and stuff like that. But that's like quite acceptable. And it's not really a loading screen; it just cuts to it. But it's like it is an open world, so you can go wherever you want. And this is, I guess, a point 2.5 in the 3, because I've realized another one that sort of is that it definitely takes on that Zelda vibe, that you can go wherever you see, you can go, and
just
effectively by the end of the game you've built up you end up riding around this legendary Pokemon that has the ability to climb or to go over water or to glide. And so everything that you see, you can climb, you can go up, you can go over, you can go under, and all that type of stuff. And so by the end of the game, like, you are like, if you want to, you'll go see a point over there and you'll be like, right, if I climb this mountain here, I can
glide off the mountain.
And it's like 20 times quicker. And so like that becomes more of a thing. And then you might go up to the top of this mountain that you can't get to by like a path, and suddenly there's Pokemon up there and stuff like that. And so like, there's sometimes like little balls or that around that have got like little prizes or potions in them and stuff like that. And so it is definitely like it's a step towards, I guess, what Sword and Shield wanted in that open world, in terms of it came around the same time as Breath of the Wild. This is definitely Pokemon in Breath of the Wild, in my opinion. Like, from an open world perspective, you can travel everywhere you want to go and you can tackle it in any order. And I think that's the other interesting point, and this is probably the third and the biggest point for the whole game, which I've not seen before, is there are 3 concurrent storylines. You can tackle any of the storylines in any order. You can go after one, then move over to the second one, go back to number 1, then go and start doing number 3. And so, like, you could even just not do any of them and just go around Pokemon battling and just level up your Pokemon all you want, and you don't have to do any of the stories. And so for me, whereas it's quite linear before, like you'd follow the map round and that follows you through the story, this now is very much, you've got 3 distinct stories. You've got your gym story, so you're going around the
classic
gyms.
Gym, yeah.
Classic gym. You've got your battling against the bad team storyline, so like, you know, your Team Rockets from the original game, but like they've got their own storyline when you're going around and just taking on the evil faction that turns out to not be so evil and whatever. And then you got your third storyline, which is around unlocking the legendary Pokemon, which was the sort of that second part in Pokemon Sword that I did, but you know, it's its own story. I will say there is an element, once you completed all 3, it then unlocks another part of the story to basically to finish off the whole story, if that makes sense. Tie it all up, so you can go off and do any of them in any order. Because it's obviously open, and it's the same with Breath of the Wild, you'll turn up at some places and you'll be massively under leveled. You'll go to some places and you can be massively over leveled. So what I did to, I guess, to try and enjoy the game a bit more, and this would be a little bit of my feedback on it, was that actually I found it quite useful to see a map of the order of the gyms and the Team Rocket people and the legendary, what I should do in terms of if I was tackling this one first, you know, this one second, stuff like that. And I was then able to go through the game at an easier pace rather than potentially, because I did go to a gym and then I realized I was like 30 under level, and I thought, well, if I go to another place that I'm then 20 under leveled and stuff, I'm just going to become consistently frustrated that I can't progress, or that's always going to happen, and I'm going to level everything up and I'm just going to have to go off and grind, and I'll come to that gym and then I'll just go everywhere else and it will just be like really easy, and then I wouldn't have got the XP from the story to progress as I went along. So I definitely think there should be something within the game to prompt you towards what is the better level. Doesn't necessarily mean you need to take that, but like for me, like that would have been nice. But the whole fact that you could just do it in any order was really good. So those were like the real big difference from a Pokemon game, that, you know, a lot less linear now. There's a story there, but you could just go off and just play Pokemon and just level up Pokemon by just doing loads of Pokemon battles. There's nothing saying you can't do that.
No. Well, it sounds interesting. Yeah, the fact the map's just completely open and the 3 concurrent storylines that you can just go off at your leisure, and, you know, leveling and Pokemon stats permitting, you can go ahead and do that however you want. Any other business before we get into the gallery that you wanted to mention, either good, bad, or indifferent? How long was it roughly? Did you spend it, do you think?
I think I must have spent about somewhere between 25-30 hours.
Yeah.
So
maybe
like about
10 hours-ish per bit, maybe 8 to 10 hours per strand, and then there's a little bit on the end as well.
And there's definitely a part where you get to it and you will have to grind again because you're like under leveled and you think, how should I go and do this? And there's definitely, once again, ways to do that quicker. And I'm not the type of person to, when I'm playing something, I just sort of want to get through it and enjoy it. I'm not the type that wants to sit around and leisurely, you know, grind up over like 50 hours. So for me, like I found that, like, I think it was a good game. So I don't think there was too much else that I can think of at this moment in time that I think would say that's massively different, or to shout about it. I did enjoy it. It was a nice game.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the gallery, then, did it earn its place into the Dimp Digital Gaming Gallery? And as I said, this is your personal exhibition within the galleries. When people wander around, they'll see like Paper's little area, and they'll be like, "Oh, what's he put in there?" So, for better or for worse, you'll always be associated with what you put in there, which is why people at Adkins drive me mad, just chucking any old crap in. Just what we're doing. But does Pokemon Scarlet and Violet earn a way into the gallery?
this does earn a way into the gallery.
So-
And so I was thinking about this earlier around where it sat in my view. And for me, I think I enjoyed this more than Sword. I was definitely on the cusp of like, should it be a bronze? Should it be a silver?
Yeah.
I think I've fallen into it, just landed into that silver category purely because of not having played Arceus. For me, it was a big, not a big step, but quite a dramatic step towards that open world Pokemon game. Eventually, as you said at the start of this podcast, getting towards hopefully that MMO Pokemon game, which I think we all want, and so forth. So it's definitely a silver. I think it would take a lot for a Pokemon game in these structures to go anywhere near gold.
Right.
I could imagine Arceus would still probably be a silver for me, having looked it up and stuff like that. Maybe if I played it, I'd think differently. But it's for me, it's a silver. It's definitely better than Sword and Shield, and it's quite a bit better than Snap. So that's where it lands in the gallery.
Well, there we go. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet earns itself a lovely silver. And then we've got Pokemon Sword and Shield sit in the bronze category. Unfortunately for Pokemon Snap, it's going to have to, or new Pokemon Snap, it's going to have to wait until someone else comes along and picks it up in the Dimp clans, and maybe they'll throw it a bone, but that's probably just condemned now to the bins outside, and then the bin men will take it away every Friday, as we know. Well, that's it for this particular edition of Idle Game Chat. We thank Mr. Paper for his time and for joining us and reminiscing a little about Pokemon, and also running through his little Pokemon surge that he's been on as of late. As usual, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. Leave a review in Apple iTunes or something. Try that. Or whatever podcast that. Some of them don't have it. That's the annoying thing. But people tend to say use Apple. But then I think, what about the Android users? Some people say they're subhuman and don't deserve it. I'm an Android user myself, so I'm not going to say that. But the Apple users will. Anyway, nothing more for us to say other than thanks for your time and ta-da.
This was a Dimp Digital production.